First episode begins a few years after leaving England behind, with Ted Lasso having settled into a much quieter life in Kansas City. Instead of managing a Premier League club, he now spends his days coaching his son Henry's youth football team while working as a cashier at a local department store. The change seems surprising for someone who nearly guided AFC Richmond to Premier League glory, but Ted isn't struggling financially. Rather, he has embraced a simpler lifestyle, taking the job merely to stay active and continue doing what he loves most, connecting with people. Ted's warmth and kindness remain as infectious as ever. Regular customers greet him like an old friend, and one former college football player, Joe, is thrilled to meet him again. Joe recalls how Ted's encouragement and belief in him during his college days changed the course of his life. The encounter reminds Ted that his greatest gift has never been tactics or trophies, but his ability to inspire people to become better versions of themselves. That same compassionate approach is on display at the store when Ted notices his young coworker, Tyler, secretly slipping paid items into his pockets instead of customers' bags. Rather than publicly exposing or humiliating the young man, Ted devises one of his trademark lessons. He pretends to steal merchandise himself, knowing the store's security cameras will catch him. When the manager confronts him, Ted subtly demonstrates the consequences of stealing, hoping Tyler understands the warning without ever being singled out. Before the lesson can fully play out, however, Ted receives an urgent phone call from Henry's school. Ted and Michelle quickly arrive for an emergency meeting with the principal, fearing Henry has gotten himself into serious trouble. Instead, the entire misunderstanding turns out to be rather amusing. The principal had discovered rap lyrics written on the back of Henry's notebook and mistakenly believed they reflected the teenager's personal frustrations. Ted and Michelle calmly explained that Henry had simply copied song lyrics, clearing up the confusion almost immediately. The meeting also highlights how much Ted and Michelle's relationship has evolved. Although their marriage ended years ago, they now share a healthy friendship while successfully co-parenting Henry. Ted lives separately, but remains deeply involved in his son's life, and the former couple communicate with genuine respect and understanding. As they discuss Henry's upcoming high school graduation, they realize their lives have become somewhat routine. They begin considering the possibility of taking Henry somewhere special once school ends, hoping a change of scenery might benefit all three of them. When Ted returns home later that day, he is greeted by three familiar faces from London: Rebecca Welton, Keely Jones, and Leslie Higgins. Their unexpected arrival immediately brings back memories of AFC Richmond and the extraordinary journey they once shared. Rebecca admits she has tried contacting Ted several times but never managed to reach him, suggesting Ted may have deliberately avoided those conversations. The group heads out for dinner at one of Ted's favorite local restaurants, where everyone claims to have different reasons for visiting Kansas City. Higgins excitedly talks about wanting to visit the American Jazz Museum, while Keely says they're in town to watch Kansas City Current play in the National Women's Soccer League. According to Keely, the trip is part of the research for Richmond's own women's football team, which they hope to launch in England. Although their explanations sound reasonable, Ted senses there's more to the visit than sightseeing and football. His instincts prove correct when Rebecca finally reveals the real purpose of their trip. Richmond is officially starting a women's team, and she wants Ted to become its first manager. Rebecca believes nobody else could build the same supportive culture and winning mentality that he created with the men's squad. This time, unlike when she originally hired him to sabotage Richmond, her intentions are completely genuine. She simply believes Ted is the perfect leader to shape the club's newest chapter. Ted isn't shocked by the proposal. Deep down, he always suspected Rebecca would eventually ask him to return, which explains why he had been reluctant to answer her calls in recent months. Rebecca also knows Ted well enough to realize he would never agree immediately. That's why she traveled all the way to Kansas City instead of discussing the offer over the phone. By bringing Keely and Higgins along, the visit appeared more like a friendly holiday than a recruitment mission. Instead of rejecting the offer outright, Ted asks for time to think. His response gives Rebecca hope, as she realizes the door hasn't completely closed on his return. Over the following days, the group attends one of Henry's football matches, cheering him on from the sidelines. The atmosphere briefly recreates the familiar feeling of watching Richmond together, reminding everyone of how naturally Ted fits into the football world. The friends also attend the NWSL match they had originally planned to watch. Keely's excitement grows as she imagines Richmond's future women's team competing on a similar stage. Watching professional women's football only strengthens her determination to make the new project a success. Ted enjoys the experience too, but he remains unsure whether he truly wants to return to the demanding, pressure-filled environment of professional coaching after finally finding peace back home. As Rebecca waits for Ted's decision, the group spends time exploring Kansas City separately. Higgins finally gets the chance to visit the American Jazz Museum, only to discover that it is unexpectedly closed. Disappointed but unwilling to waste the trip, he walks into the neighboring Negro Leagues Baseball Museum instead. What begins as a backup plan soon becomes one of the most meaningful experiences of his visit. A museum guide named Charles introduces Higgins to the history of the Negro Leagues, explaining how black baseball players were once barred from competing in Major League Baseball because of racial segregation. Rather than giving up the sport they loved, they established their own league, creating opportunities where none existed. Higgins is deeply moved by the stories of athletes who fought discrimination simply for the chance to play professionally. The visit completely changes the way he views AFC Richmond's plans for a women's football team. Earlier, Higgins had privately expressed concerns to Rebecca after reading news that another English club had shut down its women's team because it was losing money. He feared Richmond's project might eventually suffer the same fate, believing women's football simply wasn't financially sustainable compared to the men's game. As he reflects on the museum's message, Higgins realizes he had been focusing only on profits instead of purpose. Just as the Negro Leagues represented hope and opportunity for players who had been excluded, Richmond's women's team could become a symbol of progress for female footballers. He remembers that women were banned from playing professional football in England until 1971, making the new club about much more than business. It would provide opportunities, inspire young girls, and help push the sport forward. By the end of his visit, Higgins has become one of the strongest supporters of Rebecca and Keely's vision, and no longer doubts the importance of investing in women's football. Meanwhile, Ted continues wrestling with Rebecca's offer. Since returning to Kansas City years earlier, he has finally built the peaceful family life he once longed for. He enjoys coaching Henry, spending quality time with his son, and maintaining a healthy friendship with Michelle. Leaving all of that behind once again feels almost impossible. At the same time, Ted cannot ignore how naturally football still calls to him. Whether he watches children train, attends Henry's matches, or sits in the stands at the NWSL game, the passion that made him such a beloved coach never truly disappeared. Professional football remains a huge part of his identity, even if he has tried convincing himself otherwise. One moment in particular forces Ted to rethink his future. Henry's football coach makes it clear that he doesn't appreciate parents interfering with his coaching decisions. Although the comment isn't meant to hurt Ted personally, it reminds him that simply standing on the sidelines may no longer be enough. He misses leading a team, helping players grow, and making a meaningful impact through coaching. Perhaps he can still be an involved father while returning to the profession he loves. Before making such a life-changing decision, Ted speaks honestly with Michelle. Unlike the last time he accepted Rebecca's offer, things are now very different. Henry's about to graduate from high school and has far more freedom than he did years earlier. Ted suggests that Henry could come to England with him instead of staying behind in Kansas City, allowing them to remain close while Ted returns to coaching. As Ted visits his old room in his mother's house, memories of his life in London come flooding back. He thinks about Coach Beard, the loyal Richmond supporters, Rebecca, Keely, Higgins, and the players whose lives became intertwined with his own. Although he found happiness back home, he realizes he also left behind another family that still means the world to him. The final piece falls into place when Michelle supports the idea instead of resisting it. Henry's equally excited by the possibility of spending time in England and eagerly embraces the adventure. Knowing he won't have to leave his son behind this time removes the greatest obstacle standing in Ted's way. With his family behind him and his love for coaching impossible to ignore, Ted finally reaches his decision. He accepts Rebecca's offer and prepares to return to London as the first manager of AFC Richmond's newly formed women's football team. His journey comes full circle, proving that while Kansas City gave him the peace he desperately needed, football remains where he can inspire people the most.